So uh, then we went back to a normal kind of coaching, session 4, 5, as it would have happened. Somewhere around the third month after that particular session, the sponsor rang me up and said, "What kind of a miracle have you wrought?" I said, "I have no idea what you're talking about." He said, "They are already at about 80% of what they're supposed to do in terms of the achievements in that team work. And the way it is going, they might be doing twice as much, whatever." I said, "Fantastic." And that is when I started realizing that there is something that happens when, especially people who are connected in a particular project in a particular direction with common sets of goals and so on, when they come together and they're able to collaborate, communicate openly, vulnerably, there's something miraculous that really happens.
Welcome to the Masters in Coaching webinar today. I'm Kiva from Coacharya, and really lovely to have you all join us today. So our webinar today is on systemic team coaching, and with Coacharya co-founder Ram and one of our learners of the systemic team coaching program, Dharmesh, who's also a PCC coach. We're going to explore the future that systemic team coaching holds. It is something that has been garnering significant attention for its potential to reshape the future of coaching. And in our conversation today, we'll explore what systemic team coaching really means, take up questions that you all have about this concept, and understand how, wherever you are on your coaching journey, how systemic team coaching can help you to enhance your support towards your clients. So welcome, Ram. Thank you, Dharmesh, for joining us. Let's get started. So as we get started, Ram, I think it would be really interesting to know from you on just what is the difference between systemic team coaching and team coaching.
Yeah, sure. Let me also first start with what is the difference between individual coaching and team coaching, and then into systemic, and then Dharmesh can add. I mean, I'm coming from a trainer's perspective, and of course, I'm also doing a fair amount of work on systemic team coaching work. But Dharmesh is an active practitioner, and he's also been working in a corporate space, who has worked a lot on Agile, trained himself in team coaching. So there's going to be a lot of relevance. I mean, apologize for Cindy not being here. Many of you may have wanted to see Cindy here. So anyway, I show up, so that's okay. She had to be somewhere else, something rather urgent and critical. The reason we wanted to know how many of you are credentialed in that sense, or even a learner, is to understand how deep is the understanding of what coaching is. It doesn't matter whether you're PCC or ACC, but you have reasonable understanding of coaching. And many of you who have credentialed or who are learning coaching would know that the whole team coaching space has become pretty active, thanks to ICF introducing the team coaching credentials, initially with what was called the ACTC, which was for people who are already credentialed, and now something called AATC, which is for anybody who wants to start right from a learning level. And we are credentialed with both. And later on, Kiva would share some information about programs that we are planning very soon. We have been a pioneer in the space of systemic team coaching, even before the team coaching competencies were announced by ICF, because as an accredited member of EMCC, and EMCC has had team coaching credential for a while now. So we have been focusing in that area for a while. ICF, if those of you who haven't gone through it, seriously recommend take a look at ICF's team coaching competence. It's a beautiful document, extremely well thought out, extremely well presented, comparing individual coaching with team coaching, and also explaining very clearly how team coaching differs from multiple other narratives, interventions of mentoring, facilitation, team development work, etc., and all that kind of a stuff. I mean, fundamentally, the simple difference, as is very obvious, it's not one-on-one. It's not one person that you are sitting in front of. You are multiple people. Typically, a team could be anywhere 12 to 15 is the regular kind of type of a team that we normally witness. ICF says, yeah, if you have more than 15, I have a co-coach, I agree with that. The larger the number, it gets more difficult. But the fundamental difference between the two, there aren't many, actually. Even if you look at really the individual coaching competencies and the team coaching competencies, the add-ons are more to do with the numbers and to be able to see the team coaching work as a collective entity of the team being one entity. If there are 12 people, there is a 13th entity, which is the team itself, and focus on the team and wait for all the responses to come from the team, as you would do with an individual if you are really been practicing for a while. The difference, however, becomes a little more stark if you add the word systemic, which as yet ICF, for whatever reasons, hasn't added. I'm hoping that they would at some point in time, which gives a completely different spin and an interpretation on coaching, and which is what we would prefer to happen. Because I don't think any sensible organization is going to indulge in team coaching just for the heck of, take a group of people and train them. There has to be a specific reason, the organizational imperative as to why they would want a team to work on a specific project or a specific shift that needs to happen in an organization. And so you really go back, if you will, to the organizational development principles of Kurt Lewin, National Training Laboratory, and further expanded by people like Edgar Schein, the late Edgar Schein, brilliant man, Peter Senge, and now Otto Scharmer, people like that who are thought leaders from MIT, who have contributed tremendously to the space of systemic thinking, learning theory, and so on. So the fundamental difference here is that as individuals, if you coach them, and which is something which prompted me to enter into this space several years ago, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, was that how much I did work with individuals and how much I was able to, from their own admission, being able to transform their mindset, etc., and they benefited from it. When I went into greater detail about what really happened with the organization, it was pretty much zilch. Nothing happened. The so-called trickle down and things like that, all that, it's all a lot of bunkum. It doesn't happen really. If the person is really a leader, he's already got great capabilities. He may not have even needed coaching. Maybe it was just a bit of a refinement. He was able to inspire and influence people and create teams who would follow him or her, as the case may be. But otherwise, I kept a document in terms of following up where several of these people were, not all of them. And I found almost about 50% of the people either regressed back into the kind of old, whatever space they were in, or many of them quit when the organization was not able to recognize that these people have actually shifted, and they found it frustrating. So as I keep telling the story, you might have heard it before, bear with me, that there was coaching of about 12 people that I was engaged in. I was honored and privileged, and it was a wonderful experience with, well, pretty young people, a high potential team between the ages of about 27 and 35, expecting to be board members in the next few years. And as I work with them, and this was about 5, 6, 7 years ago, and it was all by phone. They were in different locations of a very, very large company. Many of you would, it's a household name in the country. And the sponsor of that group mentioned to me that, hey, Ram, I know that you have had a tremendous amount of experience in supply chain. I was a bit of a sort of a guru in that sense. I was trained by people like Toyota and stuff. And so would you be able to help us? These guys are all associated with the kind of a space. We have given them a project which, if it works very well, could earn us several crores of rupees, several millions of dollars, $100 million, 200, 300, whatever, huge number. So will you keep an eye on it? And I said, look, as a coach, I'm not going to do anything specific in terms of that. Then I can recommend somebody else. I'm not in that space anymore. But if you, as a coach, if you want me to generally keep an eye on how the project is coming on, I'll do that. And he said, yeah. And 2-3 months into the coaching space of about 12 months with 12 people, when he asked me, what's the progress? I said, I think it's not really moving because there isn't enough communication. There doesn't seem to be sufficient support, and whenever I ask about it, the answers are rather evasive, in fact. And so we discussed a little bit about what can be possibly done. I had no clue, to be very honest. And he was also struggling. And then we said, I just offered him, okay, if you could bring them to your headquarters for about 3 days. And yeah, it's an additional expense for you to bring all those people. Anyway, they might be coming from time to time, but you have to pay for my stay and stuff like that. I'll do 3 days worth of coaching additionally, if you are in agreement with that. He said, yeah, I'll jump at it. So we did that, and there's something extraordinary happened. I mean, in those 3 days, I started initially with talking to them one-on-one, and I put them together in a room, and we had about, I mean, each day was about 16 hours or something like that. And finally, once again, on one-on-one, I had no clue what I was doing, to be honest. I just put them into the room, asked them to share what they wanted. Though they knew each other, many things came up in terms of digging deeper, kept asking them questions like, hey, tell a little bit about kind of transformational experiences you've had, how it has affected you, and how it can help other people, how it can help the organization, and stuff like that, all that kind of stuff. So then we went back to a normal kind of coaching, session 4 or 5, as it would have happened. Somewhere around the 3rd month after that particular session, the sponsor rang me up and said, what kind of a miracle have you wrought? I said, I have no idea what you're talking about. He said, they are already at about 80% of what they're supposed to do in terms of the achievements in that team work. And the way it is going, they might be doing twice as much, whatever. I said, fantastic. And that is when I started realizing that there is something that happens when, especially people who are connected in a particular project in a particular direction with common sets of goals and so on, when they come together and they're able to collaborate, communicate openly, vulnerably, there's something miraculous that really happens. So then I started trying it over a period of time. And I read about it somewhere. I had been invited to become a member of NTL. So without knowing anything about that, I'm not an HR person, so I was quite privileged to be called and learned a little bit about the larger elements of systemic thinking, especially Kurt Lewin's model of the 3 circles interacting, the individual, the team, and the organization, and the systems theory as explained by Edward Schein, Peter Senge, and people like that. And then realized that one of the problems that I've had when I was working with individuals, expecting them to add value to the organization and the organization expecting the same, doesn't work that way, simply because the individuals do not directly connect with a faceless organization. What they connect with is the team of people that they are working with closely. And very often, though you call it a team, even a leadership team, they're not really a team because, I mean, if you've been to as many executive committee meetings as I have been in terms of observer, when some kind of a presentation is going on, half the guys are working on their mobile phones and laptop, walking out in and so on and so forth, even at senior levels. And outside the room where I'm supposed to work as a leadership team, there are daggers drawn. People start working in silos. They are more worried about proving themselves, their individual capabilities as champions rather than working together collaboratively, saying, hey, it doesn't matter if I lose a little bit, can you win? I know one organization that I worked and I desperately tried to sort of make them understand that why don't you help me to, because it's going to cost you less if I'm going to work with 10 people instead of paying me for 10 people separately. That look, you're going to pay me the same time in terms of hours. So it's 1/10 of that price, but plus, of course, you might need a little bit of work with other people, but it'll be much less. It'll be about 50%. They said, no, we don't want to do that because the ego of the individual leaders prevented them working together. So a couple of times I asked the question, if you guys cannot be coached together as leaders, as a team, how can you even work together as a team? Of course, that didn't endear me to any of them. So these are the kind of struggles that I went through for almost about 5 years, till about 2020. And suddenly with COVID, something changed. I really don't know what happened. I'm grateful to COVID for that. I think organizations should be grateful to COVID for that because they discovered teamwork, they discovered systemic work. And now we literally are swamped with work. We have a number of people, of course. It's a lot more effort to do that. There are not enough people trained in systemic coaching. So desperately, we are trying to help people learn what team coaching is, but not just team coaching by any word, not just by the ICF competencies or EMCC competencies, which are not enough, but with a larger framework that comes out of the desperate needs of the organization's pain points. And there's a broad picture, the vision picture that is painted, based on which then we work with a team, take the group as it is available to us, people who are working towards a common goal, and then move towards that organizational objective. So I'll stop here. It's a bit complex. It takes me a couple of hours to take people through when they are learning into this whole concept, but we will try and make it as simple as possible during this session. Kiva will be asking some more questions. But now, Dharmesh, to you, since you did this program with us on ACTC as a PCC coach, and you are a practicing individual coach as well as a team coach, and you are a fairly knowledgeable person on Agile. Tell us about your thinking about individual, team, and systemic work.
Sure. Thanks, Ram. Thanks for the opportunity. So I'll come from a very different perspective. And as I come from the software background, IT, you might see some terminologies or some things from that perspective. So if you don't get it, then please ask. So as Ram came top down in terms of directly working with the management, I started as a Scrum Master into a team. And for those who are familiar with the software Agile methodology would know that Scrum Master is a team coach. And from the program management, when I moved to the Scrum Master, I found it very interesting. I like it because I want to work with the people, collaborate, and take the ownership, accountability by the team. And that was going very fine. And as I learned the team coaching, what I realized is that the management layers, as the people are reporting lines are different, they were trying to sabotage the things. And that is when then I started working with the management. And as I found my limitation, I joined the coaching program and got credentialed into the PCC. As I went further, what I found was management was not ready to be coached. And this is where then the systemic team coaching comes into the picture, and which is where really like the systemic team coaching, because we have to look the system as a whole. And that is when I moved up to the transformation lead or a transformation coach, working in a large organization of 300, 400 people, and then helping to transform systematically. And when we are looking at Agile as a system, we look at it in terms of the people, process, and technology as a three things. But if we just, from the coaching perspective, we can focus on the people aspect. And for those who are from the IT industry would know that if the focus is only on the process, it fails. If the focus is on technology only, it has a limited success. If the focus is on the people and that is able to change the culture and the behavior at the leadership level, then only it works. So it is not just about the culture and the behavior. As Ram was talking in terms of the collaboration between the leaders, their goals are different, their motivations are different. So the key thing is to how do we align them as a system? How do they realize that they are part of the system? And it also involves the organizational changes, right from the structure as well as the goals. And that is how I would term it more as from the team coaching at a Scrum Master to a systemic coaching at more of a transformation of an organization. So I'll just pause here and then we can go further in terms of the rest of the
just to add something, Dharmesh, and before we move further, the word system means different things to different people. When I talk about systemic coaching, somebody would say systematized coaching and so on and so forth. All that really system means is an I think the first person to really talk about it seriously in an organizational context was Kurt Lewin, way back in the 1940s. And it was that we as individuals, from an anthropological sense, we become families, and the families become communities, and then tribes, and so on and so forth. The numbers increase. Those of you interested, you can refer to someone called Dunbar. He's a professor in Oxford who has defined these numbers to some extent flexibly, that if you want to have intimate level of conversation with somebody, it has to be just with about 3 to 5 people. And if you want to expand into a kind of more focused team kind of work, it could be about 12 to 15 people. These are called multiplication by 5 or 10 or whatever it is, I don't remember now. And then if it's a town hall meeting, it might be about 50 plus people. If it's a tribe, larger meeting, it might be 150 people, and so on and so forth. So, but within that, there are multiple elements. Like, for example, if you as an individual, you would interact with your own family, but you would have another system of friends, you would have another system of colleagues, you would have another system where there might be some commonalities in terms of hobbies. There could be teachers, there could be multiple other things. You are, as a human being, you are interacting with multiple systems at the same time, and each of them has a certain number of people. And therefore, in each one of those systems, you as a member, you would fall into certain groupings within that system, and then the system keeps expanding. So if you look at the simplest system in an organizational context, if, let's say, for instance, you are working in the finance field or something like that, and you are supervising a bunch of people, you are a team leader or something, then you have a system within which there are these direct reports of yours who form a system. And then you have a peer group with whom you form another system. Then you have the superiors at another level with whom you form a system. And as it keeps expanding, you finally have the total organization as a system. And supposing, for example, if like Dharmesh, you used to work for a bank, he's still working for a bank at this point in time. So then a system beyond that individual bank becomes the banking industry. And beyond the banking industry, it could be the BFI industry, and so on and so forth. So the system is growing all the time. It could comprise the entire earth, as it were, and the universe, and so on and so forth in a spiritual sense. So that is what we mean by a sense. And therefore, within that, when we look at a problem, typically, even if we are looking at a one-to-one problem, issue, coaching, we always train our people to start asking questions from a systemic perspective. In the sense, it's not, if you just use our competencies as one way of just being able to explore what is on the mind of the client, and that is what's supposed to be mastery in coaching. Fair enough, it is. Rather than thinking about asking about cognitive issues and emotional issues, if you go deeper down to sensory issues, you're accessing the metadata. So there's a lot deeper kind of exploration that happens. But it's far more powerful if you also start asking them about what is that is impacting you from other people, and how is it that you are impacting other people? Even from a space of, let's say, when you talk about an agreement, supposing the guy wants a transfer, is it just for the self-fruition of his own moving up in the ladder and something else? Or what happens to his family? The family is a system. And there could be other things that he's leaving behind, and so on and so forth. So can the systemic element be brought in? Absolutely. And the more you bring in that systemic element, even on one-on-one, it's going to be a tremendously greater value add to the client and to yourself as a coach. And then from there, when you work with a team, what happens is, let's say the team comprises of multiple functions, someone from marketing, someone from technology, someone from manufacturing, and so on and so forth. Each of them have their own teams, and they have their stakeholders, as we would call it. And in addition, that organization will have customers, vendors, and so on and so forth. So typically, if you take in any reasonable size organization, I'm talking about in Indian rupees, maybe about 100 crores. And if you're looking at, let's say, millions of dollars, maybe $50 million or something of that sort, kind of a company, you would find that if you're working with a team of 12, and each of those 12 will have a systemic connection with another, at least a minimum of 12 people or more. So you're really looking up at the viewpoints of about 150 people, which is coming together. So the more, the better, because it's like a fly's lens. You're able to discover much more about what is impacting the issues on which they are working. And this elegantly, beautifully leads into what used to be called scenario planning. And any good quality systemic team coaching can approximate scenario planning. It's extremely sophisticated, and you pay literally millions of dollars for doing scenario planning, but you could get the same effect of scenario planning by using the systemic team coaching approach. Yeah, back to you.
Thank you, Ram. Thank you, Dharmesh. I think we have a couple of questions that have also come up. So there's one from Shibu, and the question is, how is enterprise agile coach different from systemic coach? So if you could take that up.
Okay. So what I would say is that enterprise agile coach has to be a systemic coach. If I talk about more in terms of my journey, as Ram was mentioning about stakeholder, there was a group that I was working with, and initially we had the stakeholders identified. And after about 2 or 3 months, someone came from US and said that I am the key stakeholder and whatever you are doing is rubbish. And that is how the whole thing then just went away. And this is where it's really, really important for an enterprise agile coach to understand who are the stakeholders, how it is affecting the team, how it is affecting the organization. If you see nowadays, the organizations are very complex and too many interdependent parts. And one of the things as an agile coach you would see is that many of the teams are component teams when you get into the organization, into the transformation. And the first thing is, how do you break these silos of the component teams or functional teams and make them a cross-functional team? So that's very important, to break the silos. And this you will be only able to do if you are able to understand the interconnectedness of all these things.
Thank you, Dharmesh.
I hope, Shibu, that answers your question.
Great. Thank you, Dharmesh. We also have another question, which is more connected to the Coacharya program on systemic team coaching. What are the models that you use for systemic team coaching? If you could, Ram, throw some light on that, and Dharmesh, you could also add from your experience of having gone through this program.
Yeah, look, when I started working on team coaching and systemic work, there wasn't really very much to go by. Even EMCC introduced their team coaching later on. So I grabbed whatever I could. And amongst the people that I knew who were doing work, it was much more common in Europe than in the US. There's hardly anything about team coaching that was being done in the US. Of course, facilitation and all that stuff, we can address that separately. Team coaching differs significantly from modalities like facilitation. Many people confuse that with coaching. But facilitation is just about a process of engaging people in a particular forum in terms of communication. Is that going on? There is no niggle over there, and so on and so forth. Whereas coaching has a very clear beginning and the end. And usually in a team coaching approach, systemic team coaching approach, the starting point is a brief that is agreed with the organization as a whole, the top leaders. And this takes time. Like currently we are working on a project where it's taken us about 2 months even to get the totality of what the pain points are. And we are planning to start work sometime next month. It's a lot of work that's involved. We do climate studies and so on and so forth. So when you come from that perspective, there's not much that is written about. The only person that I know who has written brilliantly about it is Peter Hawkins. There's a book of his on systemic team coaching or systemic work. And he has been in many ways my own personal mentor. And he has done a number of courses with us, programs with us as well. And we are hoping that we will do more of that with him. And other than Peter Hawkins, who I have no idea, there's John Whittington, who has written a book called Systemic Constellations. So we won't have anything better. We started something, and we created something called the SPEED model, SPEED, which we'll talk a little bit about that later, which is based on many things. Now, over a period of time, we have sort of incorporated things like theory U into it, and it always had some bit of appreciative inquiry into it. So it starts with team building as sharing of strengths, and from there it moves into a co-creative visualization as producing a vision, the second stage, then exploring the gap between the vision and situational reality as options, and then creating an action plan, which then leads into very specific type of action. So it follows the competencies, and it maps beautifully with the way that ICF has defined team coaching competencies as well. So we include all this. Plus, I'm just expanding, though Kiba didn't specifically ask about it, is for me, the inspiration has been one, earlier days, it was from book Lencioni's The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, which is a brilliant, absolutely brilliant book. And then about a few years ago, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, the work that was done by Google called Project Aristotle, which is just a mirror image in a positive sense of Lencioni's 5 Dysfunctions, if you go deeper into it. And so Project Aristotle talks about two things. One is about two behavioral attributes. One is about creating a psychologically safe space with interdependability so that people have each other's back, and people can be vulnerable, open, communicate authentically, and so on and so forth. And then there has to be a larger systemic element to it in terms of goals, which are very clearly laid down as much as possible in SMART fashion, with clear evidencing in terms of impact, what evidences do they expect to produce, and also what would be the specific ROI and things like that, and what is the meaning, value, meta goal that is coming out of it. So like even today, there was a person who was attending one of our programs, and I was having a supervisory session with him. He asked me this question. Well, you know, I find it difficult to work in a team kind of this thing because in individual coaching, we are not expected to be responsible for the outcome that we produce. I said, let's stop here for a moment. If you as a coach, you are not responsible for the outcomes of the coaching session, that you have no business coaching. There's a difference between the word accountable and ownership. That's with the client, absolutely. Even from a Rogerian context, the client owns the issue and thing. But as a coach, you certainly have a responsibility in terms of ensuring that the client reaches somewhere. And unfortunately, in an individual coaching, it can be a little bit fuzzy. It could be about a behavioral stuff, but especially if you're working with emotional traumas like I do quite often, there's a very clear evidencing that person is frustrated, the person is suffering from grief or guilt or shame, whatever it may be. At the end of it, you can clearly see that person has recovered. They've been to therapy for years and haven't been able to help, and it's been possible to help them. So you are responsible as a coach for the outcome. Whereas in the case of team coaching, it's a lot more quantifiable. So when we talk to people about the benefits of coaching in terms of team and systemic approach, we mentioned three things. One is, look, it's going to be cheaper for you. You're paying for the hour. So if you have 10 people, instead of spending 10x, you're spending 1x, maybe a little bit more on this thing. Anyway, you will be spending less than half of what you would otherwise spend. And the second is that you would be able to have a clarity on the ROI. If we say this is what you will achieve it. I'll promise you that. I'm willing to take 50% less if I'm not able to produce the result. This is a guarantee that I give the people with whom I contract. So I take responsibility, but I don't take ownership for it because they are the owners of the issues and whatever. And the third is, in the process, you develop a collective leadership capability. People start, that is the invaluable kind of value that it brings, team coaching brings in. It creates that culture of collaboration, of without silos kind of behavior that can happen. So these are a flux of theories and models. It is still a very evolving space. If you think that coaching by itself is a process of not knowing, journeying and not knowing, order of magnitude, it may be 100 times more in terms of not knowing in teamwork. Because if you have 12 people exponentially, it is e to the power of 12 as complex in a team coaching environment as it is with an individual coach. Dharmesh, you would like to add something to it?
You have covered
I mean,
it all.
Agile is a very good model, actually.
Yeah, so overall, I would say yes, Agile is a good model in terms of a systemic thing. And as Ram mentioned, it's very difficult as a team. As a coach, you are just focused on one person, but as a team, at a time, you are focused on 5 people, 10 people, 12 people. So the interconnections between them, the relationships between them, and then to navigate them towards the goal. That's the challenge that the team coach has. So if you're up for that challenge, I would really encourage you to take that up. One thing that I have found very useful to create that awareness as a team is the Barrett's model of consciousness. Ram has studied that, as well as very few of the parallel models that are there. And that has helped me to get the team understand the interdependency and how their behavior is affecting the team and how team's behavior is affecting them. And just that awareness really helps them to set more of a behavioral goal as a team, which otherwise is very difficult and vague. So that is one thing that I would just want to add to that.
Yeah. Dharmesh, you're right. Barrett's is I mean, for those who may not be familiar with Barrett, Barrett was a contemporary of Maslow. So Maslow developed his original model of hierarchy of needs, which was 5 levels and later expanded it to 7. Barrett sort of worked on it, and 7 levels, he calls it not needs, he calls it 7 levels of awareness or consciousness. It's a very powerful model. So today, a company that I think he founded, Barrett's, they do a lot of work on climate kind of surveys, which lead to team behavior. I've used it. It's a very, very powerful model. And being based somewhere in Europe, somewhere it's pretty expensive. So there is an Indian model called EUM, Existential Universal Mapping by Ashok Malhotra. I don't own any shares in it. Ashok is a very, very dear friend. I qualified in it. So the EUM costs a fraction of Barrett's, and in my opinion, it's more effective. So that is one. And there are a couple of questions I just want to address. Barbara asked bibliography. Sorry, Barbara, if I was going too fast, like a express bullet train. The first, my knowledge, I mean, there were other people who worked on systemic family work and Bert Hellinger and people like that parallelly. But Kurt Lewin was the first person who developed a concept of systemic organizational development, KURTLEWIN. He migrated from, at that time, the Nazi Germany to the US, started National Training Laboratory in Bethel, Maine, which it still operates from, probably one of the most respected organizational development institutions. And he taught at the MIT. He was a professor, and his first series of students, as it were Edgar Schein, who died recently, and Edgar Schein's books on how to humble inquiry, for example, in terms of listening skills, in terms of processing, consulting process in a systemic way, in a coaching manner. They are legends. Every coach needs to read them to understand that links you to the larger space of systemic work and teamwork. And then was Peter Senge, also kind of being mentored by Kurt Lewin. Peter Senge's books, I think pretty much everybody would be familiar, The Fifth Discipline, Learning Theory, and Systemic Approaches. And now, I think probably the greatest of all thought leaders in that lineage is Otto Scharmer with his Theory U, moving from a closed approach of the mind, the heart, and the will to the open approach of mind, heart, and the will. So these are people who have at least inspired me. And in addition, there is John Whittington, who has written about systemic constellations. And of course, Peter Hawkins, my dear friend. David Clutterberg, again, he's one of the founders of EMCC. David has done a lot of work on teamwork, on systemic work as well. Together, they have run programs on team coaching for EMCC certifications and things like that. So there's a whole lot of people, and I think somewhere Coacharya website I had counted all that. Then somebody else asked me, Parminder, can you give me an example when things get complex, and can you give? Look, the problem is when organizations come to us, the first thing that they've heard about coaching, right? I mean, for some reason, suddenly coaching is something, miracle cure. It's a silver bullet to solve all problems. Half the people who come to us about coaching, they don't know about it. They don't know what the heck coaching does. But yeah, we heard that coaching does a lot of good things, and we've heard about you, and therefore, so how many people do you want to coach? What levels, and so on and so forth? Can we do it in a group? No. We would like to be coached individually. If you talk to the leaders, of course, their ego has to be fed. So it takes a lot of convincing to tell people that by coaching one or two people in the organization, it's not going to change the way that you operate. The culture has to change with a lot more people involved. So we look at it from this thing at multiple levels. Can we start? Of course, we need to start at the top to convince the top leadership team, CEO plus CXO. And very often, if you're talking about the complexity, it's very often about the culture. And they don't realize what exactly in the culture is affecting them. Our performance is static. You used to do booth before, but now we are not able to compete well. Or we think that people aren't getting along well with each other, and there is a lot of conflict in terms of the executive committee meetings and so on and so forth. Multiple of these things come up. So right in the very beginning, it's not so easy to understand what is ailing the company. There needs to be a survey that's done, a climate survey, a cultural survey, whatever you might want to call it. Like Dharmesh mentioned, Barrett is a very powerful survey, traditionally has been used. I've been using Hume instead because it's much more reasonable, and it provides me a lot more information than Barrett's does. And using that, I can get, and the organization can get, a very good overview of what's happening in the organization, in what way, and also about the individuals who have responded. Where are they coming from? Basically, they're asked three questions. In these set of adjectives, how do you rate the company as it is now? How would you like the company to be? What is the other set of adjectives that you would choose? And then what is the benchmark against which you're doing? Using these, Hume is able to provide you an amazing perspective of what can be done. It provides a lot of information on the blind spots and the complexities. It could be multiple things. In some organizations, one of them where I would never have thought about it, but it was completely conflict averse, and things were swept under the carpet. Decisions were not taken. If they were taken, they were not being done. And the survey brought it out so very clearly. So then I asked to sit on one of the executive committee meetings before I started any work with them. It was a disaster, total disaster. And it's an extremely well-known company. And then, so with the CEO, I said, usually we start in a very appreciative way of saying, hey, you guys are great, and can you share your strengths and this, that, whatever. So here we decided we would light a fire under their whatever seats. And we basically started with some very probing questions as what the heck is going on here? I'm sure you guys are very experienced, you know this, but so immediately there was a lot of finger pointing. This is happening there and that's happening there and so on and so forth. So good. So once that momentum started creating, we found that earlier they were not even willing to open up and say that, look, there is a conflict. They were tremendously conflict averse. And we deliberately created that conflict. So it all depends on what the situation is. And that is why team coaching, systemic teamwork is much more of an art. It's something that you have to keep practicing. And when we work with people for 60 hours, 120 hours, it's more to understand the nuances of it. And you go out and practice. We split them up into wisdom groups, ask them to Dharmesh can talk a little bit about it, what value it added to him. So you form your hypothetical virtual company and try and do something with it and what is coming up, and then you try and go and practice outside. So it's a lot more in terms of how you apply the knowledge than how do you accumulate the knowledge. You can read all the books in the world on systemic work, and it won't help you. What you would help you is to take the first step, go out there and start resolving issues which you know are cross-functional, cross-hierarchical. Can you get that together? Can you start working with them on that? And the speed model, I don't have the time to go through the entirety of the speed model, but it's the website gives you some information about that. And we teach that in our programs. In fact, I mean, it's not just to promote the program, but the point is it's something that has to be learned. It's not something that, it's not a do-it-yourself, quick fix kind of a solution. Yeah. If there are any other questions that we need to answer, Kiva, let me know.
I think there's just one question that's come up, which is around the difference between systemic team coaching or group or relationship coaching.
No, I mean, relationship coaching, I don't even understand what that means. If you're talking about individual relationships, it's based on emotions, so you really have to work on those. And that's a completely different subject altogether. So what was the other one? The simple difference, but there's no such thing as group coaching. Let's be very, very clear. It's a lot of nonsense. You cannot coach a group, impossible. Because in a group, you have diverse people with different kinds of outcomes. Coaching goes on the fundamental premise that there is a clear outcome towards which you work with the people. So how can you work with a group? The moment you think you can work with a group, then they have to be brought into a team. They have to emotionally bond. Like in a project Aristotle, you will have to have a psychologically safe space where they have each other's backs and they do. So believe you me, there can be a group training, there can be a group facilitation, but there can be no group coaching. If anybody says that, I'm willing to bet any amount of money to prove them wrong. But yes, the group can be converted into a team and you can start coaching a team, because then it's like, I mean, I commonly give this example. You have the Marine Corps or Army Corps or whatever it is, a large number of people, and they have multiple things to do. And then within that, you have a SEAL unit. And the SEAL unit comprises maybe 5 people or whatever it is. And Osama bin Laden had to be, whatever his name, sorry, not Obama, I'm terribly sorry, Osama bin Laden had to be killed. And so they sent the SEAL people. So that's teamwork, where each other's lives depended on what each one of them did, moment to moment, second to second. In a corporate environment, maybe nobody will die. You don't know that, but you make an assumption that nobody will die. But still, each other has to cover their backs. And that is when the coaching can happen, because then the team acts as one entity, without which it's not possible. If you go through the ICF competencies, again and again, the repeated context is treat the team as one entity, and the entity has to take ownership. And that's the first step. How do you create a team out of a group and then move forward? Yeah.
Just one thing to add, since you brought up Osama. Today is Kargil Divas. India got a victory over Kargil, and if you consider that as a war, right, the helicopters and the fighter planes has to work in conjunction with the people who are climbing the mountain, as well as the teams which are firing the guns from the bottom of the mountain, right? So it has to be as a team, and this is also one of the example you will see as breaking the silos, right, where Air Force is a different entity and the Army is a different entity.
Yeah. There was a question, Saurabh, largest team size. I would say 12 to 15 is a reasonable number, Saurabh. I've handled teams up to about 20, but it's not good. You need to break it up and then you got to do things with it. I would say about 12 to 15. 12 is a damn good number. Very small, 5 or 6 is still, I mean, there's not sufficient energy within it. You don't have enough number of people coming together. So I would say 12 is about a good thing. Agile, what is the biggest challenge that I leave Dharmesh to this thing? Puneet, affinity groups with a common goal are not a team, period. Okay, how much we wish they were. Like, for example, if I have a cohort who am training to PCC or whatever it is, you might call it in some form of affinity group. They're not a team. Each one has different aspiration of Dharmesh wants to do coaching for some other reason. Somebody else wants to do for some other reason. There's no collective consciousness in terms of specificity. If it's an organization, institution, there's a specific need for a culture. There's a specific need for launching a product or as getting a certain amount of profits or revenue, whatever it is. So the answer is affinity groups are not a team. That's as much as I know. If somebody is able to prove differently, they are welcome. Yeah, Dharmesh, what is the biggest challenge that you have faced?
So the biggest challenge I see is to make the management realize the real problem, right? And this is where the coaching and the systemic team coaching helps. Many times I have been into the meetings and management says, okay, let's do Agile. And I'm like, okay, why do you want to do it? What is the problem? Or what are the results that you want? No, sir, everyone is doing it, so we want to do it. And at the same time, there are people are very guarded if you see in terms of the organizational culture. So helping them to put that guards off and then to come to the real problem is the key thing for an Agile coach to be successful. That is what I would say.
Okay. Many people have asked about Yum. I think Yamini has given us this thing. It's called Yum Lens, as far as I know, EUMLENS. And yeah, she's already provided that. What was the other thing that I was looking at here? Something as a diversity, Jagdish had asked within the team. Jagdish, doesn't matter really. I have had teams where the eldest person was about 60, 65, and the youngest person was probably 30. Gender. In fact, the greater the diversity, the better in a team, because then you can get multiple voices, multiple views. It really depends on the coach. And so one of the key elements in any kind of a, Arun somewhere I saw, he has asked a question, what about templates? Irony is Arun is learning with us and he knows all those templates. But the point is, many of these kind of things today, there are certain action bases on which you can do. One of them is called multiple voices, where in a group you make them role play, or the real values, what are coming up for them, what are the different viewpoints, perspectives that they have. That's why I use in passing Fly's lens. Fly has supposed to be, I don't know, God knows, each eye has got several thousand lenses or whatever it is, and that's how, without moving anything, it's able to see in a multiple perspective, almost 360 degrees. What if we had that, and we had that kind of a perspective? And that's the best thing for, one of the reasons why systemic coaching is excellent as change leadership process is because of the multiple views that it can bring in and can process. So I would say that more than any other tool that I know, working seriously with the systemic approach could be probably the best solution for coping with any kind of a change. And I think somebody asked about complexity. I didn't think of it at that time. Handling VUCA, any kind of change. Everybody is wondering about whether a job will exist. Yes, of course, it will exist if you respond appropriately. If you don't, it won't exist. So anyhow, the human being will still be there, at least to create the robots. So yeah.
Thank you, Ram. Thank you, Dharmesh. I think we've answered almost all the questions, I think, that came up on the chat box. We'd also put up a poll here. We've shared the link with you. If you can go on this and we can see how many people today found some inspiration and see value in becoming a systemic team coach. So I'll just share my screen and also.
Before you put that, Kiva, I just want to add something more. I mean, Saurabh, I think you asked, it's better to, it's usually a little difficult to have, I usually have a co-coach from within the organization when I work with them, because it's helpful for them to follow up. But the fact is, even an internal coach doesn't work too well in most organizations if people are really honest about it. Because people don't open up, especially if there are issues concerning something which then later could be held against them, which is invariably what happens, irrespective of what HR people may say. So nobody, even today, I mean, today more than anything else, because the Gen Z people are completely disenchanted with the integrity of organizations, and they're not going to believe in anybody as HR or anybody else to open their hearts and tell them. As it is, they are lonely. They don't want to sort of confide in people who they don't trust. So the internal coach honestly doesn't work even in ordinary coaching. It's in general kind of, you can have a coaching mindset and you can be a leader with a coaching mindset. That's fantastic. That's what needs to happen. But not as a coach, you need an external coach for most of these. And certainly for team, it's much more important. But the point that I think the title of it was, this is how we see the future. And I'm being absolutely, not my future. I am 76. I don't care about my future. It is unimportant. But people like Dharmesh and Kiva and many of you out here, it's extremely important. As I see it, individual coaching is going to decrease. Organizations are realizing very, very much more, and it's far too expensive. And it doesn't deliver what it's supposed to deliver. Even with the best of people, it might change the mindset of one or two people, but it doesn't really translate into a major difference as far as organization is concerned. So you might have individuals coming in, and if you're going to charge $500 an hour, I don't know how many individuals are going to come to you for your coaching. So we are looking at in the future something called a democratization of coaching. And the democratization of coaching is through efforts like group work in terms of training, coaching, mindset as leadership, and then deeper into it in terms of teamwork, where it can be a fraction of that cost. And the way that is going to work is systemic, because team, believe you me, there is no such thing as a non-systemic team coaching. Every team coaching must be systemic, because ultimately it's going to provide value to the organization. So that will become the accepted norm in terms of saying team coaching is systemic team coaching. So that's going to happen. So yes, as Kiva said, she would like to ask you how many of you are interested, because yeah, we are running these programs, and we are running this. I mean, there's a great demand for this, because many people want to get there from the existing credentials to ACTC and so on. But there are a lot of new learners who can directly go into the AATC approach. So we now start running programs integrated, which will provide you both the PCC as well as the AATC as well. So you can qualify as a regular coach as PCC. Parallelly, we'll be able to instill whatever is needed as team competencies. And of course, you will have to get your experiential hours and stuff like that. Yeah, Kiva, go ahead.
So I think that's it. I think you've already shared the information, and we also wanted to share that if you are interested to know more about this course, you can write to us at community@coacharya.com or contact@coacharya.com, and we'll be happy to take up any of your queries regarding this course. So I think that's it from our end today, Ram. Anything as we close out?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Esther asked a question, but after that, I don't know. She asked for some spiritual video. I have no clue to what that spiritual video is. But yeah, Kiva, if you can get in touch with Esther, if you have a way of doing it, and you can find out what it is and be able to provide her the information she wanted. That's it. Yeah, thanks a lot. Thank you very much, Dharmesh. And
thank you. Thanks.
Yeah, we are hoping
everyone.
in the future that we will also offer Agile coaching. And Dharmesh would be a very good choice for us to be a coach, a PCC coach, and he's been trained in team coaching as well and an expert on Agile. Okay, take care. See you all. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye. See you.
Thank you so much, everyone. See you.
Thanks, Kiva. Thanks, Dharmesh. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you, Dharmesh.